On today's show, the Cavs rally to beat the Heat despite an incredible game from Bam Adebayo in a potential first-round playoff preview. James Harden drops 50 as the shorthanded Clippers get past the Pistons. Kings Nuggets gets absolutely sloppy drunk, and so much more. It's all coming up right here at Locked On NBA Game Night.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. It's the true NBA fans' one stop for all the action. Every game, every night. It's Locked On NBA Game Night. Tipping off now.
What is up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And joining me is my partner in crime, David Ramil, host of Locked On Heat. David, what did you see in the NBA last night besides an absolute disaster class from Terry Rozier?
Thanks for rubbing that salt in the wound there. A classic performance from James Harden. Some great games that came down to the wire. A lot of fun activity on a busy NBA slate on Wednesday night.
We've got 8 games to talk about here for you on our slate of NBA action. First, we want to thank you for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen each and every day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just go on over to FanDuel.com. And David, I'm sorry to do this to you, but we're going to continue rubbing salt in that wound because we're talking about Cavs Heat. Very first game of our night. Let's throw it out to Locked On Cavs for more on this one first.
Andy Cunningham here at Rocket Arena after the Cavs beat the Miami Heat 112-107. Cavs had to come from behind to get this win. For the third consecutive game, they put themselves in a bit of a hole. Really, the fourth consecutive game going back to Boston. But this one certainly looked like the game against Portland, like Chicago, and then, of course, tonight where the Cavs, against an inferior opponent, didn't have their best stuff. The Cavs looked like a team that was tired. They've looked like that, I think, the previous 3 games. But the fact that they keep finding a way to win these games, albeit this one against a very short-handed Miami Heat team, but Miami, give them credit, thought the Heat played really well. They used that zone defense that the Cavs really did struggle to solve, but ultimately the Cavs were able to use a pretty solid fourth quarter on both ends of the floor to find a way to get a win. The Cavs are now 52-10 on the year. They're the first team in the NBA to clinch a playoff berth this season. They become just the second team in NBA history to have 3 winning streaks in a season of 12 or more games.
This, first off, the Cavs are doing historic stuff with, again, the win streak and everything there, or the multiple 12-plus game win streaks and everything there. Fun bit of trivia, the only other team in NBA history to do that was the 06-07 Dallas Mavericks. And reading the comments of that piece of NBA trivia, everybody was like, what happened to that Dallas Mavericks team in the playoffs that year? So maybe a fate that Cavs fans don't necessarily want for their team this postseason. But on the Miami Heat side of things here, David, Bam Adebayo was absolutely flawless, spectacular. Use whatever adjective you want to describe to his play in this game. 34 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, 11 of 18 shooting, 3 of 5 from downtown. However, he had that just absolutely brutal turnover down the stretch of this game. Had a chance, down one score, one single possession, 110-107, and just a huge turnover from Bam Adebayo in crunch time.
Yeah, a little bit costly there. Was being defended by Max Strus, and it looked like he was going to try to face him up and maybe drive past Strus to get to the basket, or maybe draw a foul on a jump shot attempt. But either way, he wound up coughing the ball up, and that was really the only injury, the only real slight in his game, because other than that, he was, as you said, sensational. And he's been great of late. He's putting up some really big numbers, averaging well over 20 points per game over the last month or so. And he looks like he has just reached another level after some early season struggles to kind of find his place in the offense. That hasn't been the case lately, where he's been really, really good. And look, Miami, to their credit, they fought hard. They were down 3 starters, no Khalil Ware, no Andrew Wiggins. They were just struggling and missing a couple key rotation players. No Nikola Jovic, no Jaime Jaquez. So they're definitely shorthanded.
No Tyler Hero? He's kind of important, right?
No Tyler Hero, and that kind of led to some Unfortunate playing time for Terry Rozier, who wound up leading the team with 40 minutes and also leading the team with costly mistakes. So he was really, really bad out there for Miami, and he almost single-handedly cost them the game.
The Terry Rozier low light mixtape from this game is just, if you didn't watch this game, please do me a favor, go find it. I'm sure it's circulating somewhere on social media. This was a rough watch for Scary Terry in this one. But look, this was also this was a game that, as hard fought as this game was, Miami deserves a ton of credit for sticking in this one, missing so many key contributors and fighting, against one of the best teams in the NBA in the Cleveland Cavaliers. And it kind of turned into a comedy of errors at the end, because you had the Bam turnover, then Donovan Mitchell has a turnover where he, kicks the ball out of bounds. And then Miami actually fails to inbounds the ball and then has to burn their final timeout in order to draw up the proper, inbounds play. And then credit to Spo, who draws up a beautiful play. And it leads to a Duncan Robinson. He flares out, sidesteps his defender, gets up a three-pointer and hits it. And this would have been the three to tie the game. Only he stepped out of bounds literally a second before draining that three-pointer. Just a really rough sequence all around when you look at how the end of this game went, with some, poor execution on both sides by both teams.
Yeah, I mean, it was sloppy play from Miami. They got some costly mistakes again, and maybe missing some key contributors that might have avoided those mistakes. But having said that, Cleveland had some mistakes of their own. But that's what bad teams do. Miami, struggles in late game situations because they're not particularly good. And Cleveland, to their credit, is one of the best teams in the NBA, if not the best team in the NBA. And they certainly showed it tonight because they were able to do just enough to beat an inferior opponent. So you have to look at them and recognize that, that's a much better team. And Miami, despite their gritty effort, just fell short.
Now, we did see, it feels like, first off, it feels like every NBA team is throwing out so much more zone these days. I really like it. I think it's really interesting when teams try to change up their defensive coverages and try to, throw a wrench in the other team's plans, all that kind of stuff. Was there anything in this game that maybe made you think, David, looking down the line at a potential, first round matchup with this Cleveland Cavaliers team, obviously missing so many key contributors for the Miami Heat, but is there anything there that makes you think, wow, this game was so close despite how shorthanded Miami was, that maybe Miami's capable of pulling off a first round upset against this Cavs team?
It seems really unlikely. At the same time, they have beat Cleveland, and they look like they were poised to do so again tonight. It's only been one lopsided Cleveland win, and that was kind of a revenge game for Donovan Mitchell, who struggled in that first matchup where Miami wound up blowing out Cleveland pretty easily. I don't know. You're looking at this team, they match up well. Bam seems to raise his level of game up when he's going up against Jaren Allen and Evan Mobley. He likes the physicality. He challenges them to. And with a guy like Ware out there, the rookie, and his size, it kind of neutralizes what Cleveland does so well around the interior. I think he does a pretty good job of altering shots and also getting some good, easy looks. They've been really using him as a very effective lob threat. So it seems like they do just enough defensively, and it's a great call out by you, because their zone defense kind of just throws a monkey wrench into what's been the best offense in the NBA this season. They've used zone more than any team in the NBA, and they have for the last few seasons, and so they're very good at it, despite having some subpar defenders out there. So it would be an interesting matchup. I don't know if I'd go so far as to say there's an upset that could be brewing there, but I would expect it to be at the very least a competitive series, which is much more than we see from the usual 1-8 matchup.
Coming up, James Harden drops 50 as the shorthanded Clippers get past the Pistons, and the Nuggets beat the Kings in a game that probably gave Sacramento fans PTSD flashbacks to 2002. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. Look, who's in your support system? We all need people to lean on, whether it's friends, family, mentors, or professionals. Even the strongest leaders and athletes know that asking for help makes them better. Therapy is one of the best ways to build a strong support system. It's not just for tough times. It helps with setting boundaries, developing coping skills, and becoming the best version of yourself. Learning to ask for help is so important. I've seen firsthand how valuable it is to have a support system that keeps you grounded and motivated. You get everyday benefits. Therapy isn't just about crisis moments. It's a tool for self-improvement, stress management, and navigating life's challenges that are, face it, constantly being thrown at you. Build your support system with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. And continuing on here at Locked On NBA Game Night, we appreciate you for making Locked On NBA Game Night your first listen. For your next listen, go check out Locked On Heat with David Ramil. Come see me over at Locked On Rockets, or just go find the Locked On Show for your favorite team. Let's get out to our next game on the slate, David. The LA Clippers getting the 123-115 win against the Detroit Pistons behind a 50-piece from James Harden. Look, they're not a sponsor on today's show, but go take advantage of that Dash Pass exclusive offer. James Harden scored 50 points, which means you get $10 off if you are a Dash Pass member from noon until midnight. Let's throw it out to our Locked On Pistons host, Kuka Hill, for more on this one.
This is a really tough game for the Detroit Pistons to have lost. Host of Locked On Pistons podcast, Kuka Hill here. The Pistons just let James Harden travel back to 2016 and drop 50 points on him. He was fantastic in this game tonight, hitting back-to-back step-back threes, like it was Houston days. Getting to the free throw line 20 times. I don't agree with the defensive strategy. Once Harden is heating up like that, allowing him to just go one-on-one down the court in the half court, I just don't think that's a good strategy. I would have been blitzing the hell out of him, trying to get the ball out of his hands. Now, if someone else beat them, if someone else started to heat up, then it is what it is. But I don't feel like you can let Harden take you down one-on-one over and over again. But the Pistons shot 11 of 35 from deep. They couldn't get anything to go from downtown. Cade had a tremendous game, 37 points, 10 assists, 7 rebounds. Schroeder with another really good game, 21 points, 7 assists. But outside of that, it seemed like everyone else really struggled within this game. Tough game to lose without Kawhi and Powell on the other team, but it is what it is. Catch you back out there next game against Portland.
An absolutely vintage James Harden performance here in this one, David. 23 points in the first quarter alone. 23 points on 6 of 9 shooting. Nice. And at the end of the day, I don't think anybody was really prepared for James Harden to be this good this season. Like, so many people wrote off this Clippers team, and not only James Harden's level of play this year, but also the other pieces that they went out and got and added to this team. I love the Bogdanovich pickup that they made, and they're still not 100% healthy yet. And this Clippers team, I really feel like, is probably the dark horse team of the Western Conference to cause an upset or two once we get to the postseason.
Certainly the most volatile, right? You can't really predict exactly what they're going to do, but they have some really nice pieces there in terms of incredible offensive output, certainly better in leadership, some nice young players. And I think one of the unheralded heroes of tonight's win, Chris Dunn, was fantastic. Like, he wound up with 3 steals, but he did such a really good job of kind of limiting Detroit shooters, whether it was Malik Beasley or defending Cade Cunningham, doing a really good job of trying to harass him, especially late in the game as the Clippers were pulling away. And I think he's a fantastic defender, one of the best perimeter defenders in the NBA. And so they've got a really nice, well-rounded cast there. And certainly, like you said, the addition of Bogdanovich certainly helps. He wound up with 23 tonight. He was great to complement James Harden. But certainly when you have a guy like Harden who can elevate his game to this degree, it raises the bar for what this team is capable of. And I think it showed that there's incredible potential for this team. So I'm curious to see what they do in the playoffs, but I agree. They were written off completely. They lost Paul George, kind of let him walk for nothing. And then all of a sudden you're wondering, well, what's the plan here? You're kind of stuck with Kawhi. You're handcuffed to him for however long he's with this team, but he's not going to be available. He's not going to be 100% if ever again. And you don't know what Harden's going to be like at this stage of his career, but he's never really relied on this kind of overt athleticism, and he's able to get his shot off over anybody. And so he looked fantastic tonight. And I mean, I agree with Koo in terms of the defense maybe wasn't the best strategy, but he was just good enough to get past those initial defenders. And he was unstoppable when it comes to making those shots, whether it was in the mid-range or even the sidestep 3 that we're so accustomed to seeing from him. So fantastic outing for the Clippers.
Let's get out to our next game, where the Kings and the Nuggets had a game that everybody walked away mad about the officiating in this one. Let's go out to Locked On Nuggets for more.
Matt Moore for Locked On Nuggets on Wednesday night, as the Nuggets defeat the Kings in what was a completely drunk game. Not like the fun, like you go out and you have a couple of drinks and then like you wind up and you get Taco Bell and then you go home and sleep it off. More like you had so much that you woke up and your clothes were all wet and you don't understand why. Like, not like bad wet, just like pool wet. and like you have strange things in your pockets. That kind of drunk was Nuggets Kings. DeMar DeRozan made 4 threes. That's the thing that happened. Jamal Murray shot a career high in free throws. The Nuggets got absolutely stomped in the first half. Couldn't play a lick of defense, and then in the second half really buckled down and were able to get it done. Here's a crazy one. The Nuggets win a game in which Nikola Jokic is a -7. Nikola Jokic and Jalen Pickett, the only 2 players that were negative in the box score, and yet the Nuggets win behind a great performance from Jamal Murray, Zeke Naji, Christian Brown. Really everybody contributed. The rare exception to the idea that the Nuggets pretty much just get by because of Jokic. Nuggets take the season series versus the Kings as they get the win on Wednesday night.
Adding to that confusion, David, here in what was a very wild game. So Jamal Murray, career high, 14 and 15 free throw shooting, shot more free throws than the entire Kings team. The Kings attempted 14 free throws as an entire team in this one, and Murray shot 15 of them things. Jokic at one point was like a -16 or 17. He was a Nuggets team worst in the plus-minus column. And I was watching this game live and thinking, yeah, there have been some really weird things that the Kings have been doing to kind of like, I don't think Jokic ever really gets taken out of a game, but Jake LaRavia was giving him fits in this one. Michael Malone was pissed with the officiating. Jokic was upset with the officiating. Everybody on the Kings roster was upset with the officiating. There were not 1, not 2, not 3, 4 successful challenges in this game, David. Ed Malloy is like public enemy number 1 right now for both Kings fans and Nuggets fans because this game was an albatross. It was all over the place.
It was a little sloppy on both ends, but you got to give Nuggets credit. Despite the 7 turnovers, Nikola Jokic still wound up having a good game. Russell Westbrook was phenomenal. He had some nice shots down the stretch. I never look at officiating too closely and say that it's really the kind of key for this game, but it was certainly a factor. I'll give it that much. But at the same time, the Nuggets just wound up being a better team down the stretch, unlike Sacramento, who kind of fell apart towards the end.
Zach LaVine hit some big shots late in this game. He had a clutch midi to put Sacramento ahead at one point. He had a couple clutch threes as they were playing catch up there at the end. DeMar DeRozan finishing again, 35 points, hit 4 3-pointers in this one. Your point about Westbrook, I think that this Nuggets team, Russ has been so good for them, but you can already see how this team is going to get, or how other teams are going to attempt to scheme them off the floor, scheme against Russ in particular in the playoffs. And this is a little bit of a taste. We've seen this for a few games in a row now with the Nuggets where, teams are kind of basically just deciding, no, we're going to do whatever we can to force somebody not named Jokic to beat us. And there's so many different ways that you can guard star players. You can let Jokic try to do all the work by himself. You can try to force the ball out of his hands. You can send doubles. You can hedge. You can do all sorts of things. I think Jokic is actually at his deadliest when you do allow him to get his teammates going, because he can kind of get his more or less whenever he wants, when he decides he wants to be forceful with it and go after his own buckets. But Russ really rose to the occasion here, and he's been such a revelation this season for being able to execute, especially in crunch time with this Nuggets team, just making smart decisions, smart plays. There were a couple plays late in this one, like he had a wide open corner 3-pointer because the defender helped off him, and he missed the first one, and then they came back down and ran like the exact same thing. Defense did the exact same thing, gave him another wide open look at 3, and he knocked down the second one. And so as long as Russ has that confidence, and the Nuggets as a team continue to have confidence in him executing down the stretch of games, I don't think he's ever going to get, played off the floor.
No, I mean, that's a great point. And look, they were missing Aaron Gordon too. He's certainly comfortable playing alongside Jokic at this point. So I think they have a really good chemistry there and the understanding of how to kind of get around those potential schemes that you were talking about. I still see them as a really deep threat in the playoffs, and I don't think there's any team that wants to face them despite wherever they might wind up in the standings. It doesn't seem like it matters. It's when you have a player like Jokic who can change the game and control it so singularly, I don't think you really worry about the rest of the team because they do know how to figure things out. And maybe they'll try to limit him, but because of his incredible passing, he can always get somebody going as long as they are hitting shots somewhat consistently.
One more point that I wanted to highlight here before we move on. Zeke Najee's defense in this game and his defense in general has been phenomenal for this Nuggets team. He had possessions where he had a possession where he guarded Jonas Valanciunas, forced to miss. He had a possession where he guarded Zach LaVine, forced to miss. He had a possession where he guarded DeMar DeRozan, forced to miss. Like, just Najee's defense and his versatility, being able to guard up and down 1 through 5 situationally, his length, his IQ on that end, just through the roof. He's going to be a really great weapon for this Nuggets team in the postseason. But coming up, we're going to get to our final segment here. An unexpected duo combined for 84 points to make Celtics and NBA history. The Thunder beat the Grizzlies behind yet another 40-piece from SGA, and the Mavs sink even deeper into the abyss. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. Using FanDuel's live betting feature is so much fun because it keeps every moment of the game exciting, whether you're backing your team for a late-game rally or picking a player to hit a clutch three-pointer. Never feel like you missed out on your chance to get in the action. Plus, the app is so easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just go to FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. And final segment here at Locked On NBA Game Night. We've got 5 games left of our 8-game slate. And this is our final segment here where David and I like to do our triple threat rundown. Shoot, drive, pass. Shoot if you have a take about the game. Drive if you're going to ask a question about the game. Pass if there's just not much really more to add to whatever took place in the game. So let's get to this one here where a surprise Celtics duo combined for 84 points. Let's throw it out to Locked On Celtics for more.
Boston Celtics win this one by 10, and there's only one story coming out of this game. Derrick White and Payton Pritchard combining for 84 points. This is the second time in the homestand that two Celtics teammates have combined for over 80. But the Celtics even lost that other game. Look, Payton Pritchard, 43 points, hit 10 three-pointers, was one shy of Marcus Smart's record of 11 going into the fourth quarter. And to his credit, he didn't chase it. They closed out on him hard, and he went to the rim and finished at the basket. Derrick White, 41 points, was 9 of 17 from three. They were the reason, and they were hot early. They were the reason why the Celtics got going. It was an incredible shooting performance. On a night where Jaylen Brown struggled, looks like that knee is still bothering him. He still finished with 18 points, 8 rebounds, and 8 assists, but it was Pritchard, it was Derrick White, just taking care of business, handling most of the scoring for the Celtics on a night where they were shorthanded. No Jason Tatum, no Kristaps Porzingis, and no Drew Holiday. An amazing shooter night for both of these guys.
So, David, this is the first time in NBA history that two teammates each hit at least 9 threes in the same game. And it's the first time in Celtics history that two teammates went for 40 plus in the same game, which is kind of ridiculous that like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown actually haven't accomplished that together. I was taken aback by that one. I feel like this is going to be a fun piece of, I guess, Celtics trivia somewhere down the line. On the Blazers side of things in this one, Anthony Simons led the way, 30 points, 12 of 21 shooting, and then Shaedon Sharpe added 25 of his own points on 11 of 18. They also got 22 off the bench from Jabari Walker. What you got for me? Shoot, drive, or pass?
Well, just a quick question. Have two teammates ever combined for 40 plus before in an outing? Because it doesn't seem like that happens very often. I'm trying to recall off the top of my head, and I just can't recall if that's ever happened. But you know, that makes sense. Usually one teammate has it going and another one is more complimentary, kind of in the supporting role. So you rarely get to see two players like this, but it kind of shows Boston's strength. And so my take is, despite Cleveland's record and how much better they have been during the regular season, I think most people still view the Boston Celtics as the more dangerous opponent once the playoffs start, because Cleveland still relatively unproven despite their regular season success. They might have historic records. They might have these incredible long win streaks. But when it comes to the playoffs, that's a completely different animal. I have more faith in Boston's ability to go on a deeper playoff run than the Cleveland Cavaliers. Although I wouldn't be surprised if both those teams met in the Eastern Conference Finals either.
I think I agree with you there. And honestly, the Celtics too this season, they've been, strategically sitting guys, resting guys, whereas Cleveland, they've dealt with some injuries here and there, and they've still been able to persist and stay atop the conference. But Celtics are certainly showcasing that they can get out there with only, 4 out of their 6 main guys, 3 out of the 6 main guys, whatever, and still absolutely take care of business on a night-to-night basis. Let's go out to our next game where the Minnesota Timberwolves taking care of business against the Charlotte Hornets. Go out to Locked On Wolves for more.
Timberwolves beat the Charlotte Hornets by 15 on Wednesday night behind 29 points from Jaden McDaniels. I'm Ben Beacon, host of the Locked On Wolves podcast. The Timberwolves played a clean game offensively. They scored 125 points on 49% shooting. They made 21 threes, 43% from outside the arc, and just 5 turnovers for the Wolves in this game. They started hot offensively. The defense was a little bit shaky, but it improved as the game went on. The Wolves led by as many as 22 points early in the fourth quarter, but they allowed the Charlotte Hornets to get a ton of second chance opportunities. They gave up 20 offensive rebounds. The Hornets hung around and got this thing down to a 10-point game with a few minutes to play. But Anthony Edwards, Dante DiVincenzo hit some threes down the stretch to put the game away for the Wolves. Jaden McDaniels had 29 points, just a couple shy of his career high, also 10 rebounds. And Julius Randle was just 1 assist shy of a triple-double. Ant pitched in 29 of his own.
I don't know if there's a team out there in the NBA that relinquishes more big leads than the Minnesota Timberwolves, at least so far this season.
Miami Heat.
There you go. All right, there you go. Some home cooking. On the Hornets side of things, LaMelo Ball led the way with 28 points. Miles Bridges added 23 of his own. Shoot, drive, or pass. What you got for me, David?
I'm going to drive on this one. Again, we're kind of looking ahead to the playoffs, and maybe, that's still a little early considering they're only the 7th seed currently in the Western Conference. But do you think that they can be stable enough to upset any of the top teams in the West? Because obviously, again, very volatile, some great players, some great pieces there on the Minnesota side of things. But how do you see them in the final playoff standings in terms of whether or not they're capable of going on a deep run?
I'll be completely honest with you, David. I think that any team in the West is capable of a quote-unquote upset 2 down. Like, the only team that I don't think is going to get upset in the first round is the OKC Thunder. They've been the buzzsaw this whole season, but it is an absolute meat grinder in the Western Conference from 2 all the way down to 10. You could talk me into any one of those teams that are hovering around the play-in tournament bracket right now, with the Timberwolves sitting currently atop the play-in bracket at 7 in the West. You could talk me into any that. You could even still, well, maybe not the Mavericks now with the Kyrie Irving season-ending injury, but aside from the Mavericks, and maybe the Mavs still hold on and hold on to that 10th seed, but the Phoenix Suns will probably creep up on them and take that final play-in spot. At this stage, I still like the Wolves, and I was reading. I think I saw this stat somewhere. I want to say that they're like maybe eight wins now when Randall plays. They're 8-0 his last few games that he's actually been in. If I'm not mistaken, maybe I'm completely misquoting that stat. I saw it in passing and thought it was interesting and meant to write it down. Should have looked it up before hitting record. But if that's the case, Julius Randle feels like the piece, the X factor for this Wolves team, where when he's playing at this level, then I think they have a shot to beat anybody in the Western Conference, quite frankly. So, but again, you could talk me into arguments all up and down the Western Conference standings, because that's just how, I guess, the parity is just close across the board. Maybe the Lakers have been looking actually pretty solid with the Luka addition. So, all right, let's go out to our next one here. We've got the Oklahoma City Thunder 120 against the Memphis Grizzlies 103. A final score that doesn't really tell the whole story. Let's go out to Locked On Thunder for more.
Despite the lopsided final score, the Thunder had a dogfight in Memphis on ESPN. SGA went out with 41 points after 51 points on Monday. He continues his elite shooting. It was the reserves who really lifted OKC. J. Will had 4 for 4 from 3. Wiggins had double digits off the bench. Isaiah Joe had timely triples. And the Thunder pulled away from Memphis late in the fourth quarter to make it a lopsided affair. But it was the Thunder's defense holding Memphis to 103 that bought them enough time to go on that run, to extend its lead, and make this game academic at the end. But the Thunder's defense had been waning since the All-Star break, down to 22 in the league since All-Star break. And this was the first game where they really had their fastball to kind of remind everyone what's in store in the postseason. So the Thunder stifled Memphis. John Morant was awful, and SGA was awesome, and that's kind of the story of the game.
Grizzlies did not have Jaren Jackson Jr. in this game, and he's been easily their best player this season. They also didn't have Santi Aldama, so some key missing players for Memphis in this one. They were competitive though in this game. I just want to point that out. Like it didn't. OKC kind of opened things up there in the third quarter, but as the good teams do, figuring it out in the second half. Shoot, drive, or pass. What you got for me, David?
I'm going to shoot on this one. You kind of mentioned it earlier, but Oklahoma City, I have so much more faith in them as a playoff contender, despite the fact that they're a youngish team and they're, obviously somewhat unproven, but they're still so damn good. And it's all about their defense, their ability to kind of flip that switch and just lock down a team. They're just so dominant. They're clearly the best team in the Western Conference by a wide margin, something you hinted at earlier. But aside from them, you're right, it's pretty wide open. But the Oklahoma City Thunder have just established themselves as a far superior team. And I would place them above the Cleveland Cavaliers in terms of overall NBA power rankings.
The fact that you have so many players up and down the Thunder that can all make an argument to be the best defender on the Thunder is kind of the wild thing too. You can make an argument it's Shai, that it's Lou Dort, that it's J-Dub. Also, shout out to Lou Dort in this one, plus 35 in a 17-point game. Yeah, only 1 of 7 from the floor, but it didn't matter. And he hit that 1-3, and it was near the end of the game, but finally got one to go before wrapping that one up. All right, we got 2 games left for you on our slate. Let's get out to the tank-off battle between the Washington Wizards and the Utah Jazz. Final score 125-122. Let's throw it out to Locked On Wizards.
3 Shai George and Alex Sarr lead the way as the Washington Wizards defeat the Utah Jazz 125-122. How did the Wizards win this game? Well, they had 7 guys scoring double figures. That told me ball movement, team basketball, everybody eats mentality. And like I said, I know what you guys are going to say, man. I get it. Utah Jazz were without most of their team. It's the Utah Jazz. They're in the same situation as the Wizards being in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes, but you'll take a win like this, especially at home, especially before a 7-game road trip. So the next game is on Saturday in Detroit, the first of 2 straight games in Detroit versus the Detroit Pistons. We'll see if they can get 2 straight victories. Hail to the Wizards and peace.
All right, David, shoot, drive, or pass. What you got for me?
I think it's pretty obvious this is a pass type situation here. Obviously both these teams tanking, not much to take out of this big victory for the Wizards. And if they're going on that long road trip, well, I would expect them to hold on to that last seed there pretty firmly in terms of their overall approach to the draft.
For what it's worth, I just did a tankathon spin, and the Wizards held on to the number 1 overall pick. So congratulations, Washington. You won the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. Let's get to our final game of the night, where the Mavericks just sink further and further into the abyss with a 30-point loss to the Milwaukee Bucks. Let's throw it out to Locked On Mavs.
The dark days have begun, where we slip into the perilous abyss. As a team with no hope, no future, finds a way to end their season, but 19 games left. Only 8 stand strong for these Mavericks. More players absent, missing, than in attendance and active. Only one will rise up to have at least a decent game, and he is Klay Thompson. 28 points. Hit 6 threes. Najee Marshall, 22 points, 10 boards as well. Got a couple of threes. Broke his drought of 19 straight threes. The Mavs, they continue on. Not well, but they do.
It's just, I like how we've graduated from last season. We had Darth Koo with the Pistons, and man, the Pistons were going through some dark times. And now the Pistons have elevated and they're competitive, and the mantle of Darth whoever has been passed over to Nick. So now it's Darth Nick, and he has embraced the darkness here. What you got for me, David? Shoot, drive, or pass?
I'm going to drive on this one. Do you think Klay Thompson has any regrets over signing, watching what the Warriors are accomplishing and what the Mavs are now stuck with over the last couple of games of the season?
The real question, first off, absolutely. And can Klay, does Klay still have enough cachet to demand a trade? Can that be done? Can he get out of Dallas? That's the real question. It was so depressing watching Klay and I forget who else was subbing out near halftime or something. And like they literally, Klay and another Mavericks player were walking back to the bench. Literally nobody else back there. Like they didn't have anybody else on the bench. It was two players walking back to literally an empty bench. The most depressing thing ever. Mavericks are just struggling. A side note, the Kyle Kuzma pickup was so good for this Bucks team. He's complemented them perfectly. And I was trying to find his on-off numbers because Doc's been like pairing Dame and Giannis together a lot, and in those bench units that are normally also include like Bobby Portis and stuff. He like Kyle Kuzma's been kind of, I don't want to say running the bench units, but he's been out there without Dame and Giannis quite a bit. And those numbers in those minutes where he's out there without Dame and Giannis have actually been really, really good. The eye test was telling me, I was like, I don't like these lineups when I was watching him play, and the eye test was wrong. Those lineups have actually been really, really good for Milwaukee. So with that, that's going to do it for our edition of Locked On NBA Game Night. Thanks so much for being here with us on this edition of Game Night. For your next listen, go find the Locked On Show for your favorite team. Until then, we'll catch you guys on our very next Game Night.